Good morning, Harry Atherton.
How we do?
Oh, I'm
Good.
well, thank
You
you.
alright?
My meals have just
arrived
arrived,
as well.
Harry.
Oh,
A
well,
beautiful young lady. I pick up the phone and I say, "I'd like Yorkshire pudding tonight," and she disappears for 5 minutes, and then she comes back and comes and puts it directly into the fridge.
ah,
That's service, isn't it? Mind you, this young lady, I'd rather put her into the fridge and send the Yorkshire pudding back.
do you need to take a break to eat the Yorkshire pudding, or? Uh,
It's a wonderful service. It's uh, what's the name of the company?
Wiltshire Farm
Wiltshire
Foods.
Farms, and their food is exceptionally good. I don't think they stretch as far as Normandy, Harry, but nonetheless, keep that name in your brain. We're broadcasting live, by the way. Come and say hello. Yes.
You are.
Here's the you see.
Hi there.
Good
Hi.
lady.
You two have a good day. I'll see you
Okay.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Sure. Well, so you need to eat that now, Keith, or?
No. She just delivered it. God bless her.
Sure.
It's
Okay.
into the fridge for supper time tonight.
Okay. Gotcha. Mm-hmm.
I'm at the stage, Harry, where I try hard to make meals for myself,
Mhm.
but it's very exhausting. So what I try to do is to say, right, okay, say on a Monday I'll do a meal for myself, and then Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday I'll have them delivered, and then Friday I'll have another go.
Mhm.
I try hard to do fresh food and keep a balanced diet. As you know, the older you get, but you're lucky because you've still got your wife. But the older you get, the more difficult it is to actually balance your diet because you don't eat as much, you don't really like the same things, and you've got doctors and nurses and so on tell you what's good for you and what's not.
Mhm. That's true. I mean, and of course, appetite declines, I think, with age, does it not?
It
Mhm.
is. That's why I turn to drink, Harry.
Mhm.
Okay, now, Harry, it seems to me that we're getting a big fuss over local politics in the UK, and that's concentrating our minds so that we're actually not keeping an eye. And I'm talking about the major press, the senior press. We're not keeping an eye on what's happening in the rest of the world. So I think that we depend upon uh, excellent analyses by you for what's happening elsewhere, and then we'll come back and get your view on the British scene. But where would you like to start?
Well, I'm just thinking about the situation in Britain. It's a curious situation where relatively few people, I think, support the Labour government, but in polling, it still seems to be coming out ahead. I think that's because a huge majority of British citizens have lost interest in politics. They're disappointed the way it's gone, and certainly the old, what you would call centre-right supporters have abandoned completely. They've either backed Kemi Badenoch in trying to pull the Conservatives back into the mainstream, or they've gone with Nigel Farage. But there's an awful lot of people who just don't care anymore, and they're not getting involved in the polls. So we're getting a false image of where political support is coming from now. At the same time, there's a certain unifying influence by Andy Burnham coming in as Prime Minister. The Labour Party was getting a little bit splitting up over support for the backbenchers, Muslim backbenchers' support for Keir Starmer. But there seems to be still this honeymoon period for Andy Burnham. And there's a unity of thought amongst the Labour Party, which makes them look fairly stable at the moment. Whereas you don't have that on the right. It's fragmented. It's fragmented not just between the Conservatives and Reform, but now even a breakaway group, Restore. And until they get their act together, it will leave the left, the Labour Party, in supremacy. And the people who care about voting will go out and vote, very low turnout for the votes. But it will continue to remain in socialist hegemony, Britain. And in fact, isn't that not where politics is going these days? You're getting people moving to the extremes.
Well, I must say that I am looking forward to the October budget to see where all the things that this Prime Minister is promising are going to be paid for. The other thing that bothers me a little bit, Harry, is that, as you will point out, there are lots of things on the international stage which we are looking at as backed off when we shouldn't back off. Is this Prime Minister going to really abandon the international scene and look after some of the he's getting really down to he's sort of saying, well, we must stop these vapes. Well, yes, he's right. We must stop the vapes. But is it a national thing that should be looked at in the Prime Minister's office? I've got a grave feeling that we're being promised a lot of things for the average man, which is not bad. You can deliver, but can we deliver? Can we get this stuff paid for?
Well, I think there are two questions that you've asked there. One is the focus of the new Prime Minister on the government, in fact, on the issues, and he is a man who is fairly well experienced in domestic affairs, but he has no experience whatsoever in international affairs, and he's consigned that particular responsibility to Ed Miliband, who is a walking disaster, been a walking disaster with his energy policies, impoverished Britain, and his record on the international scene, having insulted about every international leader except the Chinese, is hardly legion. So Ed Miliband is going to focus on issues at home. Andy Burnham is going to focus on domestic issues because that's where his skill set lies. Now, when you talk about the other question, the financing of this, it would never, of course, occur to a Labour government that in order to pay for some of the good ideas they've got, would be to curtail wanton expenditure on some of the silly ideas they've got. They're letting the welfare bill run away from them. It's just running into a tremendous amount of money, which will eventually bring Britain to bankruptcy. And if they could save money in one sector and spend it wisely in another, that would be a very good move. But that seems to be beyond their ideological concept of governance. So those are the two questions you ask. Where will he concentrate? On domestic issues or foreign? And I suggest it will be domestic. And that's where his political future lies, of course. It's the British people who elect him, not the Americans or anybody else. And where's the money going to come from? If it's going to come from increased taxes, well, that's going to simply impact the British economy detrimentally. And it's got to start saving money in those places where money is just being wasted by the billion. It's just being thrown away. And so we could move into talking about either of those two areas. I think the domestic area is probably quite interesting. What are the challenges that he faces right now? Well, I suppose building the economy, getting businesses back into profitable status, solving things like the prison problem. But mind you, the prison problem is a bit of a myth because there are thousands and thousands of empty prison places in Britain that have been closed down. I believe the figure is 19,000 prison places in Britain are closed down because of some, I won't say stupid, but I'm going to say certainly a necessary law that they've got to be made fireproof. fireproof to a degree, fire detection systems that far exceed what any of us have in our private homes. But these 19,000 spaces have to be by the regulatory authorities, cannot house prisoners because they don't have individual fire alarms and fire protection systems in them. Well, that's ridiculous. And as this process goes through, which is going to take several years, at any given time, there are close to 2,000 cells in British prisons which are sitting there empty. And yet, and the result is, the end result was that we're having to release serious criminals into on the public, not the least police killers. So, I mean, we've got all that wrong. I mean, it's the tail wagging the dog. The regulations that require, probably well-intentioned regulations, we don't want any prisoner in his cell to catch fire, obviously, any more than we do ourselves in our own homes. But the protection they're going to afford a prison cell far exceeds that in 90% of British homes. So it's ridiculous, and we're going to release criminals on that basis. I don't understand the logic of it. There's an immediate solution to the prison problem, and not the least. And the second thing, of course, 2 major prison projects were stalled by the Conservatives during their useless period, their 14 years of non-government. So it's just a problem which is accumulated, but it's easily solvable.
Is North Sea oil. Burnham started a nudge towards some sort of rejuvenation. I know BP then said, to hell with it, we've invested a lot, we won't invest anymore, we're pulling out. And then there was, I missed the news this morning, but apparently the government has made another announcement about it. Have you got the latest, Harry?
Well, I haven't heard the latest in that sense, but I mean, he has been moving towards opening Rosebank and Jackdaw, which is, I think, an essential next step to exploit what remains of North Sea oil, because there's still a lot of oil left in there, and there's still a lot of areas that haven't been explored. So we really don't know how much oil is left in the North Sea. But obviously, there's a logic to using our own oil with great attention to environmental procedures than buying oil at more expensively from elsewhere in the world, which hasn't been brought out of the ground with equal care, and paying money for it and losing that income for the British Exchequer. I mean, it's the most ridiculous thing. Again, lay that at the feet of Ed Miliband, one of the most useless politicians I think we've ever had in the past 100 years. The Tories were pretty bad, but my gosh, he's got to get the prize, and he's now going to run Britain's foreign affairs. Well, God bless us all.
Okay, let's switch to your home country. How's my girlfriend doing?
No, Marine Le Pen, yeah. Well, she seems to be set to become the new president of France and in the next elections, 29. And so, and I think apart from one huge shackle that she's attached to her ankle, and that is she refuses to push the French retirement age beyond the current level of 62, and the nation can't afford that. It just simply can't afford it. So that's going to become an economic weight that will pull down the economy in the next few years. They've got to revise that. I'm not sure what it is in Britain now, retirement age, but they've had to creep it up all the time because people living longer and pensions getting so much more of a burden for the taxpayer. And so apart from that, however, some of her ideas are very good. First thing that you must know, she's a representative of the working class. She is not right-wing, and she's accused of being right-wing. And she may appear to be a little bit of the right when seen from a French political perspective, because the center of French governments is well to the left. And that resulted in her father being considered a fascist, and in many ways he was. But she knows she's a working class leader, and I would say almost with staunch socialist values. So there's a complete misreading in France and by the international press of where she stands politically. And it looks like she will win any of the potential contenders on to the right and the left in the double polling that happens in France. This round one and then round two. She will get the majority of votes in round one, but not enough to pass first time around. But any of the potential contenders, it shows them beating them by margins of 10, 20, 30% in the second round. So it looks like she's pretty much set to become president.
Well, I think we touched on this last week. Would you see any major change in economic policy?
Not really. I think I think she has links to the business world, and I suspect that her rise in popularity, and above all, that rise in popular acceptance, has been due to the fact that the people behind the scenes have not put the usual roadblocks in the way. So I think she will be helpful to the economy. And the French economy, France is it's a wealthy country. It too has a lot of expensive social programs, but it's conquered many of the issues that Britain still faces. Its health system has been rationalized to make it a combination of private and public, and works extremely well. It's vastly superior, in my experience, direct experience, to the British health system. I mean, the NHS, well-intentioned at the beginning, Bevan and all the rest of it, but is now a socialist disaster and getting worse all the time. It's got to be overhauled, radical overhaul, dramatic overhaul. I mean, people are dying. People are lying in corridors for 24 hours, and it's being not hidden from the public. The people know, but they accept it as one of the realities of life, and it shouldn't be. I mean, the health system in France is absolutely outstanding, and but it's got that way by becoming a mixture of private and public, so that you cannot swing the lead. If you're going to try and get all sorts of goodies for free, you won't, because you will also have to share in the cost. And this acts as a very sensible break. And it also, because the part that remains public, I'd say roughly about 2/3 of it, ensures that nobody falls off the edge. If you haven't got the means, if you haven't got the poverty, you're covered 100%. Well, you're covered 100% in all cases, providing you, if you've got the means, take out a little bit of additional private insurance, which isn't crippling. It's another form of taxation, I guess, but everybody does it, and I would think to a large degree get their money back quite easily. I think it cost you about, I'm not sure, I hope I'm right in saying this, since my wife looks after it normally, it's about 300 or 400 euros for every quarter for the two of us. So for another 1,200 euros, about £1,000 in the course of a year, you get gilt-edged medical care, gilt-edged, and a far greater success rate in any of the major illnesses, and certainly the big one, the illness of death. A lot of lives are saved by the French system that is unfortunately sacrificed in Britain.
Harry, the thing that bothers me often about these reviews and government committees that are going to look at what's wrong and how to do reform are made up of people who need reforming themselves. I mean, not fresh thinking. Am I right, or do you find that there's independence in these groups?
I'm sorry, I didn't quite catch the question. It was
whenever we look at something like, let's take the NHS.
Yes.
Okay, you're right. It's badly in need of reform. We put together a group to see how we can reform it, and it's more of the same. I mean, it's people who only see things in the same way, not people who are going to come in and freshly say, close it down for a week or whatever.
Well, the difficulty is reforming the NHS. It's all very well for me to rapid on about it, but it's easier said than done. it's become a huge amorphous mess and is a slave to its own, immobility. There are too many vested interests, and I think it's also, from what I can learn about it, and I'm not an expert in this field, is that it seems to be top-heavy in administration, and the people on the front line, the nurses and doctors, are working their backsides off, and sometimes extremely long hours, and not necessarily for high pay, and yet they're in the administrative side of the national health. They hired, a couple of years back, I remember reading a headline, they'd hired 12 new diversity officers at over 100,000 quid a year. I mean, it's something stupid. I mean, we're shooting ourselves in the foot. So the parts of the national health that are struggling to do a very fine job, but the whole thing has become as unmanageable as a runaway aircraft carrier where they've lost the rudder.
Let's switch the focus now, Harry, away from France and from Britain. What else has happened significantly in the week, and where?
Oh, in France or in the world?
In the world.
Oh gosh, well, I think the biggest thing that's happening in the world is Trump has lost it. I mean, he's finally being exposed for the charlatan that he is. He did have some good ideas in his first term, and even, dare I say it, the idea of going to war in Iran was basically well-intentioned because it was to prevent them getting the atomic bomb, which they were very close to having by all accounts. They got highly enriched uranium and enough to make 12 or 13 bombs, it was mentioned at the time. And if they started throwing those around with the gay abandon that they shower rockets on their neighbors, we could have seen what a catastrophic situation we would have had there. So there was a need to intervene to stop the program, the atomic nuclear program, and also hopefully to lead to regime change. So this was, Trump on that one got it right. But how he went about it, he got it entirely wrong. When you go to war like that, you can't effect all those changes simply by aerial bombardment. You've got to get boots on the ground, and he certainly hadn't got the authorization from the American public or American Congress to go that route. And he actually ran for election on not getting involved in foreign wars. So he's totally mismanaged the war. Somebody's head must roll, because it appears that even in a relatively limited war like that, they've totally depleted the American armament stock. Well, that shows they weren't even in a case to face up to China, somebody big. I mean, if they've used up all their weaponry in a few months, it shows who was in charge of procurement should, as I say, heads should roll, because modern wars are unended. Putin's war in Ukraine has now been going over 4 years and approaching 5 years. I'm not sure. And so you've got to develop the weaponry to maintain a war of that dimension, and he didn't. So all in all, it's losing the war. He has already effectively lost the war. All he's doing is looking for an exit to it before the midterms, because otherwise he's going to be clobbered in the midterms. He's going to lose Congress, and therefore his hands will be tied in any form of foreign adventure. So that is the largest single change that's happening in the world today. The demise of Trump, really, and the emasculation of Trump. He's powerless now. He's proved himself to be quite useless. He was a bombastic, detestable sort of a guy in the first place. But at least he had some basically good ideas, and he didn't know how to carry them through. I think largely through to his autocratic style of government. And there was no collective wisdom that he would listen to that warned him against some of the pitfalls. But for the United States to be humiliated by a bunch of fanatic ideologists in a country, a powerful country, Iran, interesting country, modern country in many ways, but they've won hands down. And it's I think it's maybe it's probably the equivalent of Suez, of what Suez was in '56 to Britain. It's the humiliation that will teach them that they no longer have that major authoritarian role to play in the world. And that is a dramatic change, and it's happening before our eyes right now. It is the moment of decline. America, the United States of America, still the most powerful country in the world, still has an economy which is a third bigger than China's, a massive enterprise. It's not spent yet, but it's the turning point. It's the Suez of America's Suez crisis. And I think this will live to haunt us. It will affect the price of oil. It will affect the way business is done internationally. And so I think we've reached a turning point with his defeat, clear defeat in Iran.
And you don't see, do you, in Vance and there are no other names really at the moment in the spotlight, Vance, but you don't see any change, do you?
I don't know that they're going to be the shoe-in, either Rubio or Vance or any of the people that are waiting in the wings to inherit MAGA, to inherit Make America Great Again movement and continue the philosophy. I think he will have done great damage, brand damage to the name of MAGA. And there will be other people coming forward. There already are new political groups forming on the right, based on isolationism, the movement, which was very strong just before World War II, the Lindberghs and everybody backing that. And you get some of the ex-MAGA people now forming political groups, and they're very influential, very powerful, and they've got backing of industry. So it's not, I don't think either Vance or Rubio will be a shoe-in if when Trump goes down in flames. Well, Trump is already going down in flames. And so that will, as I say, that will discredit the brand, and they're part of that team, and they'll carry part of the collective responsibility.
As leaders of the Western world, that's quite worrying, is it not?
Well, I think the leaders in the Western world, there are few and far between. There's no collective concept as to what the Western world is anymore. You can see a consensus coming together between people like China, North Korea, and Russia to a degree, though Russia's pretty much a spent force. That brings me back to your initial question. I think we're only a very short time away before Russia starts to flex its muscles with the object of expanding on the Ukraine adventure, but with the idea of calming Allied support for Ukraine. I don't think we're far away from the Russian Navy seizing British ships on the high seas. We've been doing that to them, and their so-called shadow fleet under the maritime law that you're allowed to stop and search a vessel that's carrying a false flag. Well, they're going to do it, and what would we do about it? Would we actually send a gunboat? We haven't got any to send anyway. So we could actually start losing elements of our merchant navy, many of which pass through Russian waters, or they'd have to skirt Russian waters to avoid being seized. And so I think we've got a very serious threat of war with Russia. Britain is not armed to face that. London has no anti-aircraft protection whatsoever, as far as I can see. And the pressure that could be put on Britain if we then continue to support or part of the Western world, and the Western leaders will collapse like a pack of cards. So there is very little Western leadership, and the bad guys can see now, and they'll see what's happened in Iran. They'll see how easy it is to bend the Western will, and so I wouldn't place much hope. And of course, if he does go into a wider war, that will then buy him the political authority in Russia to go for mass mobilization. And since it is a populous nation, still, it's reducing in population, but it's still a populous nation compared to Ukraine, let's say, they could just mass their armies and then overwhelm Ukraine and continue and overwhelm some of the NATO states. if not all of with strong resistance, of course, from people like Poland who've upped their military expenditure. But Britain would be an easy target. I mean, Britain, they could walk through Britain like a hot knife through cheese, through butter, you know.
Yeah. Okay, step outside the economic problems, because sometimes the spirit it can be renewed, whether you got the dosh or not, by a charismatic leader. Now, we talk about the States, but what about Europe? Is there a charismatic leader, apart from my girlfriend coming through?
I can't think of one. There's nobody who seems to be prominent in Germany. The AfD seems to be moving ahead, but they don't have any inspirational types at their head. The post-war German constitution, which gives so much balancing power to the Länder, the different landed regions of Germany, is such that you can't get. The idea is to prevent any further dictatorial adventures such as Hitler and what have you. So there's no notable leader coming forward in Germany. There's certainly not one that I can think of in France. And normally, if people don't block their copybook, they'll get in for a couple of terms in the French presidency. Holland was an exception, and Sarkozy was an exception. But normally, if Marine Le Pen gets elected, she's in there for the next 10 years. And so that's a long time before we're looking for a new leader, and none of them are on the horizon as yet. Spain is a basket case. I mean, its economy is doing fairly well, strangely enough, under the socialists, but ideologically under Sanchez, I mean, they're making themselves the pariah of Europe and making a mess of things. So there's no sign of leadership there. I can't think. Meloni in Italy, she has shown leadership, but Italian politics are so fragmented that they have to work on a coalition basis in any case. So that their margin of maneuver is considerably limited. But she's been doing a respectable job. But she doesn't come out and look like she would become a European level leader. I think she's trying to do a decent job in Italy, but I think that's probably that's her political limit. Yeah. So no, I can't think of anybody that's likely to suddenly become a savior in the Churchillian sense, in the De Gaullean sense. No, I don't see anybody on the horizon. And what happens, of course, in politics when people put their head above the parapet, all the jealous people shoot it off, and so nobody had thought of Andy Burnham until the last minute, and then very quickly he was ushered in and crowned prime minister, and hasn't even had to face Parliament yet.
No. I mean, we got an interesting.
So he popped up out of I won't say out of nowhere, because he had been a minister in previous Labour governments, and of course it had a good run of things in Manchester, taking a lot of the credit for what the previous mayor, who I think was a Conservative, but I'm not sure, had set in place, and so they came to fruition under his rule, and so he comes back. He comes away from Manchester with a good track record. I mean, hoping that would be applied to Britain, but I think the structural challenges of British politics are quite different from running a big town like Manchester. Yeah. Well, little by comparison to Birmingham, I suppose. I mean, if there's going to be a second capital in the north, why shouldn't it be Birmingham?
Well, it's always been known as the second city, and in fact, there are a number of businesses that call themselves Second City. Mm-hmm. So actually, the West, quote, is in pretty dire straits when it comes to any form of leadership, isn't it?
I'm sorry?
It's in dire straits when it comes to leadership.
Oh, dire straits. What the
West?
Quebec? Sorry,
the West.
Oh, the West. Yes, it's the weight of what we must remember what we mean by the West. Are we talking Europe? Or are we talking about
yes, I mean, I'm
West,
talking
if we include the United States and Australia, New Zealand, people who think like us, democratic nations, as opposed to totalitarian states, I think we still have the potential for a lot of influence, but we take a lot of things for granted. Not least of which, as I say, is um, Truman's adage. Remember, was walk quietly but carry a big stick. Well, we're trying to walk a little noisily, and we don't have any stick at all.
at all.
Unless we represent some hard power in military terms, or even prepared to use economic power in a military way, we would doomed to be coming out second to the people who play hardball. And so we're very much working with one hand tied behind our back because of our philosophies. The same philosophy, as I say, that they, thousands of British prison cells standing empty because some good well-doer has decided that they should have individual fire protection systems. Well, maybe they should. But as I say, I mean, we just make rods for our own back in the West and set rules. 2,000 new rules a month issued by Europe, by Brussels, and Britain wants to cozy back up to Brussels. I mean, it's a bit of a joke, really. We made the mistake, or the Conservatives, the useless Conservatives in power of Cameron onwards. I mean, they didn't take advantage of Brexit. Well, he resigned when Brexit came through. That's just shows you how he had no notion of what to do with Brexit when he was suddenly presented with the fact that it had happened. And nobody took advantage of the freedom that getting rid of those European rules gave us. And we didn't get rid of them. We still operate under about 3,000 European laws in Britain that are still on the books, and we abide by them. I mean, crazy. We tied our hands behind our back. We didn't take the advantages of Brexit. And mind you, with Brexit, we've still come out ahead of the game. Been a massive saving in what we would have been paying to Europe. Our economy has grown. Our economy has grown well in comparison to the rest of Europe. Not brilliantly, but most cases better. And our expansion of our trade with the rest of the world has grown. And in the meantime, the Russian economic envelope has been reduced from, I think it was about 40% of the world's economy. It's now at about 20%. Which so it's a sinking ship, Europe.
Yeah. Let's look at quote the opposition, because you suggested that both the Russian and the Chinese economy are going through some problems of their own.
Oh, indeed they do. I mean, Russia lives largely on oil exportation, and that's being curtailed to a degree. The Ukrainians have been developing their own weaponry, which can reach right through to the refineries and all sorts of things. And even their commercial distribution system is under threat, with their Amazon, as it were. They're destroying the warehouses and what have you. So they're under strong economic threat. There is an argument that Putin has lost that war. And certainly that's a valid assessment so far, unless he expands the war in order to bring the Russian middle class on side and have and therefore be in a position to order mass mobilization. But it's already increased defense spending up to about 7 or 8% of the economy. And in fact, on the day-to-day economy, you get figures that go much higher as to the amount of money being spent on a daily basis on defense. So, but he has essentially lost that war unless he expands it. And so, being the kind of guy it is, better be watching out for him to expand that war, and better be ready for it. I mean, and we couldn't, even if we started spending money on defense, it would take 5 to 10 years before the impact of that increased spending would be reflected in our sufficient armament to protect ourselves. So we're in a very vulnerable position. Now, China's got particular problems. It's tried to build a domestic market because otherwise it's an export or die economy. Most of its money comes from flogging stuff to somebody else, and it's certainly been very successful in that operation. But it hasn't developed the strong domestic economy that is necessary for stability in the American sense. America could actually live on its own. It's fully supported if it didn't sell anything to anybody else ever again. Its domestic market, its domestic existence, just remaining within its own borders, it could have a very successful economy.
I mean, I think you said that the Chinese population is shrinking somewhat, probably as a result a few years ago of only producing 2 children, and you got 5.
Well, the one baby policy that led to reduction, and that it's been climbing slightly, but it's reached a peak, and now will enter decline. It is believed that it will drop well below 1 billion. It's difficult to give figures for these things, projections, mathematical projections, but probably from a peak of 1.5 billion, it'll drop well down below 1 billion. Not a serious decline in population as that threatens Japan, which population could well halve by the end of this century in Japan. That's an amazing.
Wow.
I don't know why. I don't know what the explanation for that is. Just maybe Japanese lost the art of sex. I'm not sure. With all the pretty Japanese girls around, I can't say how that should happen. But they're threatened with a population decline. India still climbing. But apparently being able to absorb that rise, the economy rising commensurately, it has promised. But no, China has a demographic problem, no question about it. And it has a model problem, an economic model problem, and that it's focused too highly on export as opposed to developing a domestic market.
Before we leave that part of the world, what about the rest of the Middle East, the old Asian tigers, and places like Taiwan and Korea, which are punching well above their weight? Do they continue to do that?
Well, Taiwan is in a tough position. It looks like they'll be abandoned. At the moment, they're an essential component in the technological world with their chip making capabilities and advanced electronics. But they may well be sacrificed in some future economic political deal with China, and I think they're aware of that. And of course, what the Americans are trying to do, and many European nations are trying to build up industries which will make them less reliable on the electronics of Taiwan, and that'll be a disadvantage for them. So, and for the anniversary of the Chinese Revolution, which comes in '49, I think their ambition is to see the nation reunited. This always felt it was part of a province of China, but that's their ideological position, and they're not going to move from it. But it will be, I think, a fairly bloody fight, because the Taiwanese have armed themselves to the teeth, and they're no pushover. There will be a bloody war, and it will lead almost to the annihilation of Taiwan as we know it today, as a Western nation. It would not survive a war with China, because it would be all-out total war, which the Chinese, once they've launched it, could not afford to lose. And so they'd even go atomic. I mean, they're not going to lose it once they start it. So one imagines Taiwan would be eliminated. But if they if the Chinese try to attack it with conventional weaponry, I think the Chinese will also lose a huge numbers of people. Let's say 1 million, but I mean, what's that to the Chinese? I mean, the totalitarian state, they just sweep that under the carpet. So anyway, but I think more of the emergence of Africa, when it gets its act together collectively, which is one of the reasons, combining the two subjects, it is why China has made enormous commercial and political inroads into Africa. And of course, it's very important to watch what happens in the Middle East, because with the defeat of Trump in Iran, it will effectively redraw the map of the Middle East, not necessarily international boundaries, but in terms of loyalties. And already pacts are being designed or signed between countries that previously wouldn't have been talking to each other. Treaties and realizing that the American protection umbrella, is not as strong as they thought it was. So there'll be a progressive withdrawal of American bases from the Middle East, and the power vacuum will be occupied by, Turkey, and of course, the backdrop to all of this is the internationalization of Islam. The huge Islamic presence in many parts of the Western world, who owe their loyalty to their religion and not to their country of adoption. And it is a subtle form of immigrating and imposing one culture on another. Even Erdogan himself in Turkey in 2008, he said it was a crime against humanity that the Turkish immigrants, and we're talking about 500,000 people under Merkel, should be expected to adopt the customs and values of the country that has welcomed them. That is the disloyalty to their origins and to their religion. And he said to Merkel, and she was shocked, that they should remain Turkish, Islamic, and their values and their loyalties should not be to Germany. And these are people who all speak German now. I mean, so religious, ideological immigration has played a far greater role than simply the kind of immigration we're getting in Britain at the moment. That's economic, and we've called that upon ourselves, and we're allowing it to happen. And of course, everybody's talking about the small boat crisis. That's nothing to do with the small boat crisis. That's a minuscule number of immigrants, illegal, admittedly, who are coming in. What about the hundreds of thousands of legally admitted instruments? We're handing out visas, whatever they call it, like confetti, on a legal basis. Hundreds of thousands. So what's 500? What's a few thousand that risk their lives crossing on the boats? It makes the headlines, but that's not where the danger is. It's handing out visas just the way we hand out lollipops to children, and that's where the danger is. And now, oh, by the way, yes, I read in the newspaper that they're going to house them in some of the more smarter areas of Britain. That's going to go down well.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, yes. It's ideology is very odd when you look at world affairs. But tell me, Harry, why do you think Islam, as a religion, a way of life, and so on, is increasing and becoming so powerful, when Christianity is struggling to maintain even one church per society?
Well, Christianity is a benign religion. If we ignore the Old Testament, where people get slaughtered in their millions or hundreds of thousands at least, it is a benign religion, and it allows other philosophies to exist, and simply applies Christian thought to the application of human behavior, whereas Islam is not. Islam is a totalitarianism in religious form. There are rules, and if you break the rules, you pay draconian penalties. I mean, if you don't go to church on Sundays, they don't cut off your ear. But if you decide that you don't want to be a follower of Islam anymore, they'll cut off your head.
Yes, that's right.
I mean, these are not religions; they're totalitarian doctrines, and I think it's almost childlike to compare the Christian religion with the Islamic religion. Now, the Islamic religion has got some very good rules, and not all of them are bad, but and they're designed to bring order to society. And though the Islamic religion was born of a period which we, in probably Western historical terms, we would refer to as the Dark Ages, when society had, when the Romans left Britain, for instance, it was left in a bit of a mess, and there were no rules and regulations. Law broke down. We call it, the Dark Ages. So there was a need to bring back some order to social life. Well, the same thing happened, led to the birth of the Islamic religion. And so many of the rules, societal rules that it espoused, were basically good, sensible rules. But then it became very quickly moved towards being totalitarian. It had to have this element of mystique to it. And it became rigid to a point that it now, demands that people die for it. And in fact, the greatest honor to have is to die and be welcomed to heaven by 72 black-eyed virgins, or whatever the famous line is. It's become much more than a religion.
Yeah. I
and there are many followers of Islam who try to practice it in a benign sense, because they have been influenced by some of the host countries, and they try to live lives, for instance, in Britain, according to the British cultural concept. But the more extreme forms, and that's what we're talking about, the more extreme forms of Islam are very dangerous.
But Harry, if you accept that sometimes history does repeat itself after generations or centuries or whatever, in fact, when the Romans left, it was the Dark Ages. But the more I find out about the Saxon kings and the Saxon rule, it was a period of actually good governance and quite creative. And then the Normans came and scuppered that, and were just a brutal regime. Do you think that could happen again now?
Oh, I think it happened quite easily, because very few of the younger people in Britain would defend the concepts that made Britain in our lifetimes. We grew up when people like Churchill were in charge, and I'm not extolling the virtues of Churchill. He had all the faults too of mankind, but we grew up with those values. But the young people today don't have. I think the last poll showed that 5% actually are prepared to take up arms and fight and die for their country. Wow. It's a good thing World War III isn't about to happen, and when there is threat of World War III happening any time.
Let's just shift to new emerging nations, because we've talked about the Australian continent, perhaps Africa, and one or two other areas. I know that it's not going to happen fast, but do you see emerging leaders?
Well, I think nations like Australia and certainly to a degree South Africa, New Zealand, are trying very hard to establish their own cultural values and stand up for themselves. And depending on certain problems that indigenous problems that they face, they're doing a pretty good job of it. And the proof of the pie is in the eating, and the result is that many thousands of British people are leaving Britain, young people, and where are they going to? A lot of them are going to Australia. This massive exodus of young Brits going to Australia, and it's welcoming people now from all over the world. It's become much more internationalized. Australia. It normally had a barrier against Asian immigration, but no, it's becoming very much of a cosmopolitan society. And so, no, I mean, these nations are moral and forces to be reckoned with. And they could well be the bulwark that helps protect what you referred to earlier as the Western world against the territorial ambitions, philosophical ambitions of some of the totalitarian states like China.
I mean, looking at history again, is the world as it was known then had a lot of warlords and so on, but quite powerful and sophisticated groups which, they did have the broad names of Germania and Frank, whatever. And suddenly, out of nowhere, came Rome. And what I'm really getting at, I suppose, is can you see a quiet hero developing? I mean, you just mentioned possibly Australia and the southern nations, but is there any one nation? Doesn't matter whether it's big or small. That is likely to come marching across with banners similar to the way that the Romans did.
Well, when you bring that factor into it, you're talking about the progressive change in power, supremacy, and we go back to anywhere from Alexander the Great. Let's Trojan Wars, the emergence of Greece, the decline of Greece, the subordination of Greece, and in the meantime the emergence of Rome, and then the decline of Rome. So these are the British Empire. Once 3/4 of the world was painted pink on the school map. There've been moments when each entity has had its privileged moment in the sun, and that's cyclical. It's a cyclical nature, but that almost applies to humanity. You get in generations, you get the poor person who works hard and gets himself on the ladder, and then his son builds that up a little bit. The grandson then goes to university, becomes a doctor, and then the further generations, the need, the drive is very often gone, and you see a decline. So even families' fortunes change generationally. Progressively they go up and then they slowly go down, and new wealth, new motivations are created every day. Most of the rich people today, it's new money. It's not old money. It's not all this wicked inherited from the rich granddad and all the rest of it. And many of the great fortunes that we read about today are all made by these people from scratch.
Yeah.
Whether it's Bill Gates or Elon Musk or any of these people, and it's cyclical. So it's in human nature, and our own lives reflect that. We start when we're young, and we need to claw ourselves up the corporate ladder or whatever or express ourselves in our chosen profession. And then we reach a point of comfort where the motivation, the need for material need or the spiritual need declines, and we grow old and die. And we're no longer the people that we were when we were fighting our way to the top. Not that you and I ever did reach the top, but we tried.
No, we didn't do too badly one way or the other. But,
We
no,
tried.
I don't think either of us is Elon Musk.
We tried. We had ambitions, and when you no longer have ambition, it's best to go to the graveyard. But by the way, a marvelous headline I saw in a British newspaper was there was a road that led to a cemetery, and then it stopped there and didn't go anyplace else. So some guy in the city council put a sign that said "dead end," and the council got hell for it, for something, for lack of sensitivity. But it was right on, dead end. Yeah.
Harry, a fascinating morning again. We've been going an hour, but the picture you paint isn't particularly pretty. Would you like to have one final word before you go?
Well, all I can say is that I missed the eclipse yesterday. I was busy having a beer at the local bar, which is actually within eyesight from where I'm sitting now. And there's a slang expression in French. When something has gone missing, you can say it's éclipsé. It's a reflexive verb. It's set éclipsé. And I said to the barman, "My beer has eclipsed." And I said, "Ma bière s'est éclipsée." And he understood fully and brought me another beer.
Harry, always a delight. Will you be with us next week?
Okay, we'll see you on Thursday.
Good. Look forward to it.
With pleasure. Well, goodbye to all. Okay.
Okay.
Bye. Bye.